You know, when it comes to investing, there are all these invisible threads connecting your stocks. Some of them give you strength, but others, they create these hidden risks you can't even see. In this explainer, we're going to give you the tools to finally see them. So you think your portfolio is diversified, right? You own a dozen, maybe 20 different stocks. But what if that's just an illusion? What happens when a market storm hits and you realize all those carefully picked stocks are sinking together, like they're tied to the same anchor? This is the classic trap of hidden correlation. See, if all your stocks react to market news in the exact same way, you aren't actually diversified. Nope, you're just holding a concentrated bet that's wearing a very, very convincing disguise. So, how do we find these hidden connections? Well, the main tool we use is called the correlation coefficient. It sounds fancy, but it's really just a simple score that tells us how two stocks move in relation to each other. Think of it like a relationship status for your stocks. This score runs on a spectrum. A +1 means they're in perfect sync. They move together, like best friends. A -1 means they're perfect opposites. When one zigs, the other zags. And a score right around 0, that means they're each dancing to their own beat. There's almost no relationship there at all. Okay, so calculating the relationship between two stocks, that's pretty helpful. But a real portfolio has dozens of stocks, and the market has thousands. How in the world can we understand how one single stock, let's say Apple, relates to everything else out there? And this brings us to our key tool today, the correlation coefficient distribution. This is a super powerful chart that goes way beyond a simple two-stock comparison. It shows you one stock's relationship with the entire market in a single picture. It lets us see its true personality. So how do we even build this thing? It's actually a pretty straightforward three-step process. First, you just pick a stock. Let's stick with Apple. Second, you run hundreds and hundreds of calculations, measuring its correlation score against every other major stock you can find. And finally, you take all those individual scores and plot them together on one graph to see the big picture. And here's what happens when you plot all those scores. Each one is just a single data point, but when you put them all together, they start to stack up and form a shape, a distribution. We're not looking at single relationships anymore. We're looking at an overall pattern. And believe me, that shape tells a story. Okay, so how do we read that story? Well, a nice, symmetrical bell curve centered on 0, that's a fantastic sign. It means the stock has really diverse relationships, which is great for diversification. But a skewed peak that's way off center, that's a warning flag. It's telling you the stock moves with a very specific clique, and that concentrates your risk. All right, enough with the theory. Let's make this real. We're going to dive in and look at the correlation personalities of 3 of the most talked about stocks on the entire planet: Apple, NVIDIA, and Tesla. First up, Apple. Now, you'd probably expect it to move with the market, and yeah, it does. But its personality's a little more complex. It's kind of like a reliable connector with really broad relationships, but it also has a clear allegiance to its fellow tech giants. Now look at this distribution. You can see the main hump is centered pretty close to 0, which is good. That shows its broad, diverse connections. But see that smaller second hump over here around positive 0.5 to 0.6? That's its big tech clique. It shows that while Apple has a lot of acquaintances, it has this core group of friends, like Microsoft and Google, that it moves with very, very closely. Next up, NVIDIA. For the past couple of years, NVIDIA hasn't just been following the market. It feels like it's been making the market. It's so fueled by the AI boom that its unique story means it often just behaves like a lone wolf, charting its own course. And its distribution shows this perfectly. Look at that. It's a wide, low curve centered right around the 0. This basically means NVIDIA's day-to-day moves have very little to do with what most other companies are doing. This low correlation profile makes it a really powerful potential diversifier because it's not singing the same song as the rest of the market choir. And finally, the ultimate wild card, Tesla. Its stock price is legendary for moving based on production numbers or even what Elon Musk tweets. not necessarily what the broader market is doing. Its fate often seems completely detached from general economic trends. And yep, its chart confirms this big time. It's the very picture of low correlation, centered almost perfectly at zero. This means that knowing where the S&P 500 is going gives you almost no clue where Tesla is headed. From a pure correlation standpoint, it's an incredibly powerful diversifier. So when you look at them all together, you can really see the trade-offs. Apple offers stability, but it ties you pretty heavily to the tech sector. NVIDIA and Tesla, on the other hand, offer fantastic diversification from a correlation point of view, but that independence comes with its own major risk: volatility. And this shows us exactly why correlation can't be our only tool. So the answer is just to buy low correlation stocks like Tesla and NVIDIA, right? Easy peasy. Well, not so fast. We've identified one super important ingredient, but a truly resilient portfolio needs a little more. Correlation is critical, for sure, but it isn't the whole story. We need to layer on a few helper questions. First, volatility. How wild is the ride, really? A low correlation stock can still be a stomach-churning roller coaster. Second, beta. This measures how sensitive a stock is to the entire market's movement. Is it just getting dragged along for the ride anyway? And third, momentum. Is the stock's underlying price trend actually healthy and moving in your favor? This brings us to a really fascinating, kind of counterintuitive insight: adding a volatile stock to your portfolio. That sounds risky, doesn't it? But, and this is the key, if that stock has a low correlation to everything else you own, it can actually make your entire portfolio safer relative to its return. It's all about how the pieces fit together. So the big takeaway here is to think of your portfolio as a system. Understanding correlation is a huge piece of the puzzle. You can see that right here. But to make that system truly strong and resilient, you have to balance it with these other factors: the volatility of each stock, its market sensitivity or beta, and its current momentum. They all have to work together. So here's a simple 3-step framework you can use. Step 1. Use that distribution chart we talked about to find stocks with good diversification potential. Step 2. Check their volatility and beta to make sure the risk you're adding is actually manageable. And step 3. Check their momentum to make sure you're betting on a healthy underlying trend. The goal of all this analysis is simple, but it's incredibly powerful. It's to consciously build a resilient portfolio where all your assets aren't just marching to the beat of the same drum. You want a symphony, not a marching band. By looking at these correlation distributions, you're basically getting a pair of X-ray glasses. You can see the hidden framework, the invisible connections inside your own portfolio and the market itself. So the final question is, now that you can see them, how are you going to build your portfolio differently?